Hello friends and welcome to Smart Coach. Today we are talking about one of the most important areas of modern Indian history, and therefore the video is going to be long necessarily. However, I have decided to compartmentalize the videos for ease of access. You can access the video according to your needs, and at the same time you can also compartmentalize your own thoughts while reading about this video or while studying studying this area of modern Indian history. So what area have I picked up? It's Indian National Congress. That is, we are going to deal with the rise of the Indian National Congress, okay, and we will also talk about the moderate phase, okay. And while talking about Indian National Congress, the rise of Indian National Congress, we already it is necessary for us to get a background to the Indian National Congress, right? So now we will proceed forward, and before we proceed forward, I must tell you that there are extraneous forces and internal forces at work behind the rise of the Indian National Congress. We have to think about the rise of the Indian National Congress, the causation behind the rise of the Indian National Congress in various categories, okay. So there are categories such as external factors, then there are internal factors, then of course there are economic factors, there are political factors, and also there are social factors, okay. So all of these factors together, they give rise to a political movement which culminates in the formation of the Indian National Congress, okay. Now let us proceed and let us look at the idea of colonialism itself. What does colonialism represent? Well, colonialism, if you talk about, you can look at it in this dichotomy, okay. You can look at it, look at colonialism in this particular dichotomy, that is the colonial or the colonizer and the colonized, okay, the colonizer and the colonized. And what is this symbol? The greater than symbol. This is the guiding philosophy behind colonialism, that is the colonized are always lower than the colonizers, okay. The colonizers are always greater. Greater in what respect? Greater in social, economic, political, and most importantly, this is the defining argument that they are better in their social, cultural, and their intellectual achievements, okay. So the colonizers always hold themselves socially, culturally, and intellectually greater than the colonized. Therefore, it is the argument which gives the colonizers the right to colonize a particular area, okay. The colonizers get their right, or colonizers justify themselves by this argument, okay. They justify colonialism through this argument, all right. Now, if you are colonized, how do you free yourself? By breaking this article down, okay, by breaking down the justification of colonialism, that you can also achieve, you can also do whatever the colonizers, say that you can't do, that you are, unable to do, all right. In case of British colonialism, it takes on a phrase, okay, a phrase which has been quoted by various scholars who are studying colonization of India or British colonization of the world, because Britain at the height or at the peak of its colonialism and imperialism had the largest empire, okay, in the entire world, all right. The sun never sets in the British lands, it was said, okay, that sun never sets in British colonies, because they had colonies stretching all across the world, all right. And the phrase that scholars use for this argument which justified British colonialism, the phrase is the white man's burden, okay. White man's, not woman's, of course, white man's burden, all right. Women will never be at that point of time, the point of time we are talking about. You see, this argument itself has so many layers, right? White man's burden, all right. So a person is white, he is a man, and then to civilize the world is his burden. That is the justification for colonialism, that a white man who is superior to the black man, to the brown man, to the red man, to the yellow man, okay, this white man will come in, he will colonize you, okay, not a white woman, but a white man will come in, he will colonize you. Why? Because it's his burden, burden given by whom? By God himself, okay, that God has given this burden that this white man is going to civilize the black, brown, yellow and red man, okay. So this is the chief argument, and this argument has been you see, part of colonization of India since throughout the history of India. In fact, when India was on the verge of independence, what did Winston Churchill say? That if the British leave India, then India will, you see, dissolve into anarchy. Sorry, not dissolve, devolve into anarchy. Okay, so that's the you see, that's the argument that the colonizers always provide. All right. And in order to be completely free, you have to break down this argument, all right. Now, moving forward, okay, the first thing that you have to know is that there are movements all across the world, okay, which start breaking down this argument, movements all across the world, but these movements are white against white, such as the French Revolution. Okay. Then the American Revolution, the Revolution or Revolutionary War, it is also known as the American Revolutionary War, okay. The American Revolution, of course, precedes the French Revolution. The American Revolution is the first experiment in democracy, when America, the colonies in America, the British colonies of America declared themselves free of British authority. And then the French Revolution, which gives us the idea that every man can be equal and that every man will be ruled by laws themselves, okay. Now, these movements have already taken place in the 18th century, okay. How do the Indians get to know about this movement? Because of the introduction of Western education. This is one of the chief causes, okay, Western education, all right. One of the chief causes behind the rise of you see, political consciousness of the Indians. When was it properly introduced? You can say that the Minute of Macaulay is the landmark, okay, 1835, and then there is the Wood's Dispatch, okay. And with the introduction of Western education in India, Western educated intelligentsia gets access to revolutionary thought, and gets access to the histories of these revolutions. These revolutions are founded upon revolutionary thought, okay, intellectual thought which fueled this revolution, and these intellectual thoughts are now accessible because Western education has been implemented in India, okay. And what do they read? They read famous philosophers such as Rousseau, okay. They read Rousseau, they read Voltaire, they get access to J.S. Mill, Bentham, and there are scores more, okay, of intellectuals whose ideas fuel the national consciousness of Indians, okay. Rousseau, he wrote about the social contract. It is known as the contrat social in French, all right, in which he postulated that a society with the combination of individual wills, it becomes a national will, and the national will decides who is going to rule them, all right. It is not the will of whoever is in power to rule them. It is the nation which decides who is going to rule them. And if the rule is not you see, if the rule is not to the liking of who is being ruled, they have the right to overthrow such rules, okay. Then we have got the spirit of the laws, that the idea about rule of law, okay, given by Voltaire. We have got the utilitarians, J.S. Mill, Bentham, then there is James Mill, who is J.S. Mill's son, all right. All of these ideas, they fuel the intellectual revolution that happens within India, okay. Now, why am I talking about the intellectual? That is the social aspect of it, before I am going into economic and political aspects, okay, or the internal external aspects. Internal external, as we have already discussed, there are French Revolution, American Revolution and stuff like that, okay. But however, why am I going to social first? It is because of the fact that although you see, there are arguments, opposing arguments. Some arguments say that economic and social condition or political condition must be present in order for you see, the intellectual climate to grow. For intellectual ferment against anything, you first have to have the economic and political maturity. However, you see, some others argue that intellectualism, without intellectualism or without growth of intellectualism, how do economic and political maturity, you see, how do economic and political maturity, it translates into political activity. It might not translate into political activity. So these dichotomies also you have to take care, okay, because when we are talking about the rise of Indian National Congress and the moderate phase, remember, questions, think about questions from both MCQ and from essay type perspective, okay. Now, if you are thinking about MCQ and essay type perspective, you see, you have to be comprehensive in your study of this period, all right. You cannot just focus on MCQ type questions and then just say that it's enough, okay, because you have to write an eloquent answer while you are answering these important questions. These are epochal areas of Indian history and you have to be very thorough with them, all right. Now, we have talked about the introduction of Western education in India, okay. Now, intellectualism takes root. How do these intellectualism spread? We have talked about the taking root of intellectualism through the introduction of Western education in India. How do they spread? They spread through the vernacular and English press, all right. At the eve of the passing of the Vernacular Press Act, there were upwards of 150, in fact, there were upwards of 160 newspapers who were circulating in India among about 1 lakh individuals. The circulation was huge, and all of these newspapers, they evaded censorship, they evaded the, you see, control through various means, okay. They were various means were employed by the editors in order to speak out about the British rule in India, okay, speak out about the inequality or speak out about the oppressiveness of British rule in India, okay, and these newspapers were discussed in every town and in every library. They were discussed even in villages, okay. Vernacular newspapers, they spread even in the rural areas, all right, and the issues and topics which were spoken about, these were discussed all over, okay, and therefore the press played a very important role in the spread of the ideas, okay, in the spread of intellectualism, in the spread of national consciousness within Indians, that you see, India constitutes a nation and that the rule of the British is oppressive, and therefore the nation must decide that the British should go or British should stay, okay. And the overwhelming consensus was that the British, of course, should either give dominant status, that is at this period, okay, they cannot ask for more. First off, the British would constitutionally increase the membership of the Indians into the you see, workings of the government, and then of course it goes on to dominion status, and then it leads on to complete independence. This is how the press was very instrumental. It spread these ideas, okay. Now, moving forward, we have talked about the press. We should also talk about the rediscovery of the Indian past, okay, very important part, okay, rediscovery of Indian past. Now, when we talk about Jawaharlal Nehru, we always, you see, always remember the discovery of India, one of the important books written by Jawaharlal Nehru. We also, you see, think about the discovery of India. Although this book was written quite late in the history of Indian independence, however, there were other such, you see, other such philosophers or other such thinkers who wrote or who talked about the past of India, okay, and that the past of India is something which is respectable, which can be yearned for, and which can be longed for, okay, that India was once a glorified land, that it was a land of, you see, that it was a land of opportunities, if you use the American term, that it was a golden, there had been golden eras in the history of India, and that these golden eras show that India was one of the most, you see, one of the most ascendant, you see, polities of the entire world in the ancient past, in the medieval past, okay. And this rediscovery of Indian past, the Indian past glory, it also happens during this phase. The social reform movements, okay, social reform movements, they stress upon the greatness of the Indian past. Why does Dayanand Saraswati say that we have to go back to the Vedas? Because for Dayanand Saraswati, the Vedas, you see, represent the epitome of Indian culture, and the Vedas represent the greatness of Indian culture vis-a-vis the British culture. What did we talk about? The dichotomy between the colonizers and the colonized. The colonizers are always greater than the colonized. Now, these argument that India's past was far more glorified than the colonizers' past, this argument starts breaking down this argument, okay? This particular argument that India had a great past, it starts casting doubt on these arguments. In fact, Mahatma Gandhi's idea about the morality or the immorality of Western civilization is also drawn from such ideas, okay? You will find a good example, or you will find a good description of Mahatma Gandhi's idea in Hind Swaraj, where he talks about the evils of Western civilization, and where he where he stresses upon the greatness of Indian civilization. So all of this is very important. The rediscovery of Indian past is also very important. Now, we have talked about the intellectual climate. We have talked about the social aspect, the intellectual climate. What about the economic and political aspect? Well, politically, India is unified. Perhaps after the reign of the Mughals, India for the first time sees a vast unification from north to the south, okay? And although some scholars might say that there were princely states within British India, all right, and they were, at the pale of political unification. However, the British also had great amount of control over the princely state through indirect rule. And through direct rule, we already know that the British had completely unified India. And political unification means civil code, it means legal code, okay? Civil code, that is, these are legal codes, of course, and then criminal codes, okay? That is the laws, okay? Laws were unified, administration was unified, okay? So all of these aspects of the governance of a state, they are unified, and because of this administrative and civil or legal legal unification, what do we see? We see that the decisions taken in Calcutta have a resounding influence over all across India, all right? The era of decentralization has come in, of course, and however, still the decisions which are taken by the British authorities in India, it still impacts all of the Indians, and therefore because of this political unification of India, the feeling of being left out, the feeling of being oppressed through laws, through administration, all of these feelings are felt by the nation at large, not by pockets within the nation, but by the nation at large, okay? So a British policy against the Muslims, okay? Right after 1857, the British policy of divide and rule, that is a policy which favored the Hindus against the Muslims. The British policy affected all Muslims living in India, not just Muslim pockets in Punjab province of Pakistan or Punjab province of India, present day India, of course, not just Muslim pockets of Bengal, but it affected Muslims all across India. This unification is what led to the growth of the political consciousness of the nation, that the nation is politically unified, that people within this nation are politically unified, okay? Now, as far as political unification is concerned, we also have to talk about the economic unification. By economic unification, of course, we mean that British Indian state, it was economically unified land where, again, just like political unification, where an incident, perhaps in Bengal, an economic incident, that is such as a famine in Bengal, it will affect farmers all across India, or the lack of production in certain sector of manufacturing, it will affect all of the sectors of India, okay, all of the economic sectors of India. Such was the economic unification of India. And economic unification of India was not just internal, it was not just an internal phenomena, it was also an external phenomena. This internal unification of India through such you see infrastructural developments as railways. If you talk about the infrastructural development concerning the administrative or political unification of India, you will have to talk about the telegraph system. However, if you talk about economic unification, you will have to talk about the railways. Both telegraphs, railways, they play a very great importance in the rise of nationalism within India, because these were you see infrastructural developments were you see captured by the nationalists and were used by the nationalists for their own gains. Now, I was digressing. We will come back to economic unification and the external economic unification of India. Internally, it has been unified. How does it get externally affected? Because Indian economic is irreversibly you see unified with the British economy, okay, with the world economy, okay. So now you have to also understand that the Indian economy is not a self-contained economy after the British come to India, because it is an economy based on globalization, okay, through colonization, all right, and therefore they are unified with the global economy. So a global recession will also affect the Indian economy. That's what happened during the First World War, during or before the First World War. That's what happened before the Second World War. Worldwide recessions were also affecting India, okay, and incidences such as famines in India, okay, incidences such as lack of production or growth of production in India were also influencing the world economy at large, okay. This another aspect of you see economic unification must be kept in mind, all right. So now all of these you see economic, political and social, that is intellectual. If you are talking about social, here we are talking in the you see we are talking in the confines of intellectualism, all right, that is the social intellectual fabric. So we have talked about the economic, political and social intellectual fabric, okay. We have also spoken about the external and internal you see influences, okay. Now how do they translate to growth of nationalism? Through something as simple as economic nationalism. For the first time, people like Nauroji, R.C. Dutt, G.K. Gokhale, M.G. Ranade, they come out, not R.C., sorry, R.P. Dutt, okay, they come up with a theory about the inequality of British rule. And what inequality are they talking about? They are talking about the economic inequality of British rule or economic oppression of the British rule. That the British rule in India is necessarily oppressive because they are, you see, economically motivated, okay. The white man's burden of civilization is just a veneer, that they are economically motivated in order to make profit, and that is destroying the economy of India. This is the first systematic approach towards a criticism of the British rule in India. Very important, the rise of economic nationalism, okay. This is also very important behind the rise of, you see, nationalism within India, all right. Now finally we come to an aspect called racism, okay. Sorry, there is no S here, okay. Racism, all right. Now what is racism? Well, of course, the context of racism you can get in this argument, the central guiding argument which should, you see, guide you through the study of all of these things, okay. This is the argument which will guide you, and you will find racism within that argument also, that white men are superior to black men, okay. Now the first proper example of racist philosophy, that is the politicization of racist philosophy within India, you will find it in Macaulay's Minute itself, okay. You will find it a very succinct description of how the British considered, you see, British considered the Indians as an inferior race, and how it affected their political, you see, their political or administrative strategies within India. You will find it in Macaulay's Minute itself, because Macaulay in his Minute says that a single self in Europe or single European self is far more greater than all of the literature that has been produced in India. Now that's a great argument to make, okay, or that's a great proposition, all right, something which cannot be you see, something which cannot be accepted. However, it was widely accepted, and therefore Anglicism came into being. Previously, the Orientalists were focusing upon Indian, were focusing upon Indian literature or the classics of India, and they did not consider Indian society or Indian culture as inferior. But with Macaulay's Minute, we see that Indian culture has been deemed inferior by him. Therefore, racism, political racism. You will find great examples of racism in Lytton's period. Why? Vernacular Press Act, 1878. You will find the Arms Act, okay, you will find the Arms Act. Then you also have the, you also have the Ilbert Bill controversy, Ilbert Bill controversy. Then of course, a great famine is going on in Bengal, and in 1877 they celebrate the Grand Darbar in Delhi, okay. What does all of these legislation state? Okay, if you are talking about legislation, all of the legislations till about 1935 and even beyond 1935, of course, all of these legislations you will find there are, you see, racist elements in this legislation. Why? Because the legislations do not provide you see, autonomy to India. These legislations believe in the argument that Indians are not ready to rule. Why? Because they, of course, are an inferior race. They are not able to rule themselves, okay. They are not able to decide what is good for them, what is bad for them, okay. In legislations, you will find mentioned that Indians, suppose in diarchy, the argument is the most important aspects of state, such as the army, such as the interest of civil servants, such as the you see, foreign affairs, all of these will be controlled by central authority. They are not part of the transferred list. Why? Because Indians simply won't be able to manage such aspects, okay. That's the philosophy which is guiding the British administration in India. It is inherently racist, and therefore the Indians realize the racist nature of British rule in India, and it is this realization is also one of the chief causes behind the rise of nationalism within India. Because now with all of these you see, all of these causative agents present, India finally realized, or the intellectual, educated intellectual class finally realized that Indians have to seize power, okay, from the British, that the Indians have to you see, at least try and argue with the British about the inequality of the rule, okay. That's what the moderate phase is all about, at least arguing with the British about the inequality and the oppressiveness about their rule, okay, and try to gain some kind of concession from that. That's the nationalist moderate phase of nationalism, okay. Later on we will find radicalization of these of nationalism in India, and finally in the independence of India. So these are in you see, in brief, the causes which inform the growth of nationalism within India. Very important part of your studies, okay, very important part of your studies, because if an MCQ comes, you will have to answer it in, you see, in detail, because of the fact you will have to also be precise. However, you will also have to explain in detail about the growth of nationalism within India. In the next part, we will discuss about the growth and rise of associations within India, culminating in the rise of the Indian National Congress. And finally, in the third part, we will discuss about the modality of the Indian National Congress, that is, how did the Indian National Congress in its early moderate phase, how did it you see, carried on its political activities, okay. And also we will assess the achievement of the moderate phase of the Indian National Congress. With that, I hope that this video has been helpful to you, and I hope that you will be studying really very hard, okay. And you see, I am quite certain that you will succeed. Thank you.